Our next session is Endpoint Identities and Apps, oh my, Modern Threat Protection. Please welcome Stratascale's Stephen Christiansen and Drew Nicholas from Microsoft.
Hello, everybody. Welcome for joining us here today. We're going to spend our session talking a little bit about threat intelligence, threat management, and some of the things that Microsoft is doing in that space. My name is Stephen Christiansen. I'm a principal security consultant with Stratascale. Thank you. And I really focus on helping businesses leverage their security investments to really accelerate strategic initiatives, really helping enable the business to be more agile, both safely and securely. And we'll get a little bit into that and how Microsoft is doing that as well. With me is Drew Nicholas.
Hi, Drew Nicholas. So I'm one of the directors in Microsoft's Cybersecurity group. I lead a team of global black belts, specifically around cloud security, I think CNAPP area. Been at Microsoft about 10 years in different roles, and it's an honor to be here with you today.
Thanks. We're going to kick this off with a quick poll around what is your organization's biggest challenge in building a modern threat protection program. A couple options here: lack of visibility across all your endpoints, identities, apps, too many disconnected security tools, no way of helping to integrate those together, difficulty keeping up with the threat landscape, and really just limited internal resources. I'll give you a few minutes or 30 seconds or so to answer across this. Looks like majority limited internal resources, which is something we hear quite often, is just being able to, adapt quickly and be more responsive to the demands of the business. So jumping into this, first question I have, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of cybersecurity tool vendors that are out there. So many choices. How can your organization help streamline the SecOps and the tool sprawl that's taking place there? And how do you focus on interoperability and operationalizing those tools?
So in a previous life, I used to be part of Microsoft's customer-facing incident response team called DART. So my team was the team that you never wanted to call. We'd come in for things like ransomware, domain dominance, and time after time we went in, customers had 60, 70, 80 different security tools. And typically, those tools were absolutely alerting, but if you think about it from an adversary perspective, their job, fly under the radar, low fidelity alerts. This was a very common scenario. I'll give you an example. So about 5 years ago, we were on an engagement. We get there, very similar to like Jordan mentioned, we saw that they were syncing their domain admins to Entra ID. So it was DA underscore was the usernames and the nomenclature. So adversaries start password spraying Entra ID. And fortunately, they had MFA enabled. Everything's good, right? So they're still getting low fidelity alerts because the adversaries compromised the username and password. They just couldn't get past the second factor. So unfortunately for the organization, they were deprioritizing the low fidelity alerts. Also, at the same time, their VPN had a vulnerability that allowed for MFA bypass, right? So as the adversaries, they just pivoted over to the VPN. So they've harvested all the credentials here, they've gotten the domain admin credentials, pivoted over to the VPN, and now they're into the system. And from there, they've already grabbed all of the domain admin passwords. It was just figuring out how to get to the domain controllers. And all of these are creating low fidelity alerts along the way. But at no point was there any context like, hey, this user's identity was compromised. We see him, this user logging into a weird, from the VPN. From there, we start seeing weird activity over here. So it's all of these tools were alerting, they were doing their job, and it was very good. It just wasn't communicating to one another. I like to give the analogy on in these tools that don't really have interoperability and no communication with one another as a castle that's being protected by 20 guards who don't speak the same language. And it's kind of, they're doing great work, they're just not communicating with one another. And so for Microsoft, we've been very focused on this consolidation, this platform approach that we kind of spoke of yesterday. And so we're doing this both from a pre-breach and a post-breach. And I really echo everything Jordan said, that the attackers are looking for ways to get into your environment. So pen test, do tabletop exercises. One of the things that we're also very focused on right now is CTEM, or continuous threat exposure management, and really trying to correlate signals across it from a pre-breach perspective, right? So if you're an adversary, you're taking the adversarial approach. So I'm looking from the outside in instead of from the inside out. The next piece of this is understanding your critical assets and then tying your signals together. So if you can compromise, in his scenario, he mentioned the load balancer, which had the domain admin credentials on it, or they actually did the telnet and got the domain admin credentials, then you could see what permissions that user would have back to the critical assets. And so when we start talking about creating connected services, that's what we mean. One of the things that I'm actually most proud of from the Microsoft standpoint, a few years ago, MITRE ran the simulation with Wizard, Spider, and Sandstorm. We took 150 alerts for each of the attacks and correlated it into a single incident. So we're saying this isn't just one alert, it's 150 alerts in context equals one incident. So it's about correlating signals together and looking at it from some sort of a framework. So we take the MITRE framework, so from a recon perspective to domain dominance perspective. So we're looking at it across the MITRE framework.
Yeah, and looking across open standards, open APIs, being able to bubble up signals from multiple different source systems into kind of a unified security platform so that you can begin to anticipate and visualize across what that threat landscape looks like.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we're also doing is mapping this to specific threat actors as well, right? So we talk about that we have 78 trillion signals. We're taking this in a way that we're actually looking at these attacks from what are the TTPs of specific adversarial groups and mapping those to if, for example, Midnight Blizzard, which from Microsoft's nomenclature, if you hear Blizzard, that's typically a Russian actor group. If you hear Sleek, that's a North Korean actor group. If you hear Typhoon, that's a Chinese actor group. And if you hear Sandstorm, that's an Iranian actor group. So we're also, not only are we mapping these signals together, we're actually mapping them against the adversaries that are attacking the different organizations. We map them to about 1,500 different threat actor groups.
And you do that in conjunction with other security teams as well, so it's standard nomenclature. So when you're talking about Sandstorm or any of these other topics, people understand what countries they're coming from and are able to tie that all together.
We recently announced our partnership with CrowdStrike to exactly do that, to solidify a single nomenclature across the industry to help organizations. And one of the big reasons for this is every industry has different threat actor groups. Different threat actor groups have different purposes. So if I'm if I'm a financial-based service, I'm probably looking for some of the, we call it Moonshine Sleek, which is a North Korean actor group that's very financially motivated. They're the group that's stolen about $3 billion since about 2017 in cryptocurrency. They're actually doing it to fund their weapons program, but they have specific targets. So I'm able to, Volt Typhoon is very big in the manufacturing organization. So I'm able to not only look at it from the different threat actors, I'm looking at it from what threat actors are attacking my industry.
Yeah. So now that we're on the topic of threat actors and threat attacks, we can jump into AI, which is a prevalent topic. So what has Microsoft been seeing in terms of AI, deepfakes, how it's being leveraged in these large threat attacks?
So we're seeing a lot, unfortunately, of these nation states using artificial intelligence against different countries, against different groups of people. So for example, Russia is very active right now doing AI-generated audio files. So for example, last year, the June timeframe, they published a documentary with Elon Musk voice. It was an entire one created. Some of the Chinese nation-state groups are actually very focused on AI image creation and manipulating with propaganda for there. And we're also seeing, like from the Iranian actor groups, is specifically the IGLC group called the Cyber Avengers. They're using a lot as well. They're not as mature in the AI space as Russia and China are, but they are very focused on things that we haven't seen in a long time. So we talked about it yesterday. We've actually seen them attacking OT environments. And so using AI-generated phishing emails type stuff. So one of the things that's very scary right now, I think Jordan hit it earlier, is we've always trained our employees to look for weird things in email, misspelled words or something of that nature. And we've done the training, right? We're like, look for these kind of things. Well, with these AI-generated phishing emails, they look like your best friend just sent it to you. And so from an employee perspective, they think they're doing the right thing and they think they're checking all the right boxes, but in reality, these nation states and well-funded groups are utilizing AI for their benefit.
Yeah, and if you in the audience haven't seen it, I've had attacks come at me from relatives pulling off information from Facebook. Oh, so we were at this party together over the weekend, forgot to ask you about this, or can you click on this link for, here's some pictures from the party. They're all different attacks based upon people that you trust using knowledge that you think that only you and they would have. But that's how AI is being leveraged to start culling information off of the internet, off of your social accounts, and bringing it into the organization. And there's even tools now, games. Jordan mentioned memes. You know, AI, Gen AI, great for creating memes. There's also apps where you can call celebrities, and you can call their phone number, and they'll answer the phone. Larry the Cable Guy will start talking to you in his voice and interacting with you. And it's just showing that the maturity of these type of deepfakes is accelerating across the industry. Jumping into the next, really looking across one of my favorite topics, which is zero trust.
Yes.
Microsoft's made a huge investment with their Secure Future initiative, where they're implementing zero trust across their organization. Can you talk a little bit about the investment they've made and how they're approaching security in the modern age?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've publicly stated is SFI is our Secure Future initiative, really this idea of secure by design, secure by default, and secure operations. And one of the big things that we're focused on is we have 34,000 engineers, security engineers focused on this. Now, we talk about it from the security hierarchy of needs. Historically, we've always said like endpoints was the most important foundation. Everything's built around the endpoints. But in this new world where you have data and identities that can come from anywhere, we've really repositioned it and created identity as the core foundation. So for Microsoft, we've actually eliminated about 6 million tenants, unused tenants in our environment. We are a company of about 300,000, so that's where the 6 million over the years, and close to 1 million unused applications. For zero trust, though, we've been on the journey for quite some time. It is just very hard for a company our size to really build it into it. But what we've been saying for years is this approach of verify explicitly, just in time, just enough, and access, and assume breach. And so when we start talking about this, when we say verify explicitly, it's around correlating, going back to correlating the signals, is like correlating signals of identity, devices, data, applications. And so in creating your access policies based on what the destination is. There's a lot of frameworks, 100% agree with Jordan on the follow the framework idea. For zero trust, I recommend the CISM maturity model. It's a very good one. It breaks it down into 5 different groups. It's identity, data, devices, network, and workloads. And so then it also creates it into 4 pillars. You have traditional, you have entry, you have advanced, and you have optimal. And so I'll just kind of break it into like the identity standpoint to start with. So traditional, we said passwords. As you get into that stage 1, maybe passwords with MFA. As you get into stage 3, it's phishing resistant MFA. And as you get to stage 4 or optimal, it's about continuously doing risk assessment on that. So the reason that things like stage 3 with phishing resistant MFA is so important is over the last year, we've actually seen an increase of what we call adversary in the middle attacks. This is another scenario where the adversaries are tricking your end users into doing things that they think is right. What it is, they would send the phishing email, they would send the link, the user would type in their username and password, and then they would get prompted from an MFA. And so historically, we've told our employees, make sure you do MFA. And what the adversaries are doing is they're just harvesting the credentials real quick and then authenticating to Entra ID. It prompts open the MFA request, then the user types in the MFA. So this is why when we start talking about that advanced state within the CISA maturity model, phishing-resistant MFA is so important. And why we start talking about things like continuous access reviews is because token theft has taken off over the years. And so we're trying to mitigate these problems with things like phishing-resistant MFA. This could be like passkeys, biometrics, but also things like continuously evaluating. Now, it's also doing it into context with what the destination is, right? So maybe if the destination is a general document, right? Maybe you don't care that much. MFA, you're good. The employee doesn't have to go through too many other checks. But let's say it's proprietary information, highly confidential. Maybe you want the user to have continuous access reviews. You want them to have phishing-resistant MFA. Maybe you also want them to come from a device that's up to date, has no risk associated with it, and you may even want them to create a reverse proxy so you block them from copying any of that sensitive information out. So it's all around taking these signals from your apps, your data, so sensitivity layer, your identities, your user risk score, your access. So if they're like privileged user, you may want them to only be able to use their privileged user account on your corporate device in a specific configuration, fully up to date. So this is what we talk about as verify explicitly. One of the other key pillars is this idea of just in time or just enough access. So no standing access. I worked on an engagement about 6 years ago where the adversaries compromised some accounts. They waited till 5:01 to start using those accounts for their administrative activity because they knew that the user left for the day at 5 o'clock. And so their accounts were just being replayed at 5 until the middle of the night. Kind of similar, I think, to Jordan making a comment about showing up after work when everybody's gone. Remove all of that access. They're not going to be doing any kind of administrative access at 5:01, so why did they have it standing? And the third, and this is actually my favorite, is assume breach. And this gets into continuous threat exposure management. So we introduced Defender exposure management, but what it is it's this view that if I look at each identity and look at each device and look at each piece of data and each critical asset, I'm going to build my security controls to prevent adversaries from getting those critical assets. So I'm looking at it using graph-based technology, and what are all of the different ways that an adversary would have to jump through the hoops to get to the critical assets? What this will allow organizations to do is really to prioritize what we call choke points. These are those entry points or those jump-off points that have the most attack paths. So think of a scenario where you have one entry point, that load balancer that he just talked about. Yep. That was from the outside in perspective, that was the only way Jordan could get in. So if I'm looking at it from that continuous threat exposure management position, my first thing I'm going to go remediate is that load balancer. And so I'm reducing the risk by being as efficient with my vulnerability and my exposure management remediation as I can by prioritizing that strategy. The other thing that I highly recommend in all of this is as you're starting to go down this path, looking at things that really define your organization from a criticality standpoint. I think this is actually the hardest part for a lot of organizations, that sensitive information discovery, doing things like who are my privileged identities, not just who are my domain admins, but who are my server admins, who are my help desk admins. So really defining those folks and individuals that have that advanced, and that's that assume breach mentality we talk about in our zero trust strategy.
Yeah, and I always talk to clients about zero trust as it's near impossible to have complete zero trust, but if you can have the appropriate trust based on the levels of risk. So looking at risk across your users, what type of users are they? When you look across your data, what's critical data, sensitive data? When you look across your network and locations and time-based, as you were saying, you've got all different metrics to look at to help you define levels of risk and what is appropriate access for users or devices to have. And you're going to see even more of it with AI, as AI the agents have identities. How do you manage across those identities? And what do you take into consideration? It's opening up that whole landscape.
One of the things that I'm really excited about that we introduced was our Security Copilot, because it has a lot of that agentic remediation pieces. We've opened up the phishing triage where it's automatically going in doing phishing triage. But what it's also helping organizations to do is actually, so my team owns Defender for Cloud, and you may be familiar with a thing called Defender Cloud Security Posture Management. So Copilot for Security integrates with Defender CSPM by helping your analyst create their remediation strategy based on what is the highest impact services. So in natural language, I could ask it, what vulnerabilities would allow access to storage accounts that have sensitive data. So maybe that's where I'm very concerned about is sensitive information. So I can easily ask Security Copilot to help me prioritize what my remediation strategy is. It also works really well from a post-breach. We talked about SFI a little earlier. One of the things that we found was Security Copilot has actually helped analysts, especially novice analysts, remediate 27% faster with 44% more efficiency, because they're able to quickly look at these different alerts, ask it questions like, why is this important? And then in natural language and plain language, it's helping them understand why these alerts, why these logs are so bad.
Yeah, and helps them develop their own agents to go out and be able to look at that as a repeatable process. So I see we are running kind of quickly on time. So I want to thank you for your time here. I want to open it up for any questions people may have around Microsoft or threat intelligence in general. Any questions from the crowd? And I can't see with the big lights coming at me. Oh, there's one there.
Thank you, Drew, for that talk. So how is Microsoft's passwords journey? Because we're being asked about perhaps deprecate the password, legacy password policy in favor of the passkey phrase, Windows Hello biometric. But I believe a few years ago, Microsoft had kind of made that commitment to make themselves passwordless. How's that going? And are you seeing that kind of uptick in other large size, Fortune 100, 500 size company? Thank you.
Absolutely, great question. So around passwordless, Microsoft's journey is 100% still very focused on passwordless. One of the things that we had to answer was how do we get users initially onboarded? And so one of the things that we've introduced recently was a tool called Verifiable ID, where it actually creates a connection between your Authenticator app and your Social Security card or passport. So it's actually verifying you. So you, at that point, you're giving Microsoft or whomever saying that I am really Drew for my initial time to authenticate. So that's the big part of the journey that we've been on, is how do we answer that initial onboarding question? Because we're doing passwordless today once you've onboarded. So I don't even use a password. I haven't used one in years because I use Windows Hello for Business, or if I'm using a Apple device, I actually have a passkey on my iPhone. So instead of me ever typing in a password, it opens up a QR code. I scan my QR code on my Authenticator app. It creates the Bluetooth connection because it's a passkey, and then it validates that I am who I am because I've had my phone as the MFA. And so for Microsoft, we're very committed to getting rid of passwords because they are pretty much the root of most incidents. And as we've seen this huge uptick over the last year in adversary in the middle attacks, this is even more evidence that getting rid of passwords are a huge focus for our organization and our customers. For our customers, one of the things that some of them are still challenged on is like legacy applications, which we're very challenged on legacy applications as well, but we're continuously getting rid of a lot of legacy applications, moving to more OAuth for the identities, and really focusing on how do we get every application to accept passwordless, specifically biometrics or passkeys.
Yeah. And I think that's about all we have time for. So it was great having you here. Thank you all for joining.